So good morning. So I want to talk to you very briefly about some perspectives on Europe's cyber battlefield. Just very quickly, ESET is a company 30 years old now, proudly European. And we've been spending a lot of time, in the last few years, working with our partners in Ukraine to try to defend against a lot of the Russian cyber aggression, which began in a much earlier time than we would think. Of course, the invasion of Ukraine happened, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine happened on the 24th of February. And the precursor to that, on the 23rd, was a widespread attacks with some wipers to cause destruction and disruption. And through the years of the full-scale invasion, through the aggression against against the infrastructure and against the people of Ukraine has continued from Russia. But of course, it didn't start there. We've been tracking Russia's destructive cyber attacks in Ukraine since 2013, when the first black energy attack happened, which caused wide-scale blackouts. And since then, we've seen many, many more of these. There are hundreds to thousands of attacks per day in Russia, from Russia in Ukraine, against the infrastructure in terms of espionage and in terms of just trying to cause general disruption and scope out possible vulnerabilities. As a kind of a global thing, let's just quickly take a look at some of the attack sources that we've seen. It's probably no surprise that the big four, as we call them, are the top. But it might be interesting to you to actually see that the Chinese-aligned threat groups are actually the largest proportion of the attacks that we see. Then, of course, there's Russia, North Korea, and Iran as the other kind of usual suspects. And then there are various other groups which are using cyber aggression to attack and to disrupt and to do espionage against other countries and against the democratic nations. So based on our telemetry, we've seen many of these groups conducting attacks all around the world, and very, very often we see the same kind of targets: the governments, technology, transportation, power, and engineering, and so on. And many of these are against technology companies and looking for intellectual property, looking for government information, particularly from things like ministries of foreign affairs. So let's take a quick look at some of the Russia-aligned groups that we've seen attacking. Again, really typical targets. They're targeting government, they're targeting defense, transportation, and energy. We've, of course, seen those, as I've said, in Ukraine. But there is often collateral damage, but not only collateral damage, there is deliberate attacks against other allies of Ukraine. Some of the top groups that we see active, anyone who follows this stuff will know that we use very strange names for these groups, but this is how it works. And these specific groups are the most active ones that we've seen coming out of Russia, in some cases like Gamaredon operating out of occupied Crimea. And these are the main agencies that undertake most of these. The Gamaredon group was identified, and many of the key players were identified and are under international indictment for international arrest warrants. Gamaredon has been active since at least 2013. As I mentioned, there were many early attacks, and this attacks on the government sector is really skewed by Gamaredon's activity. There are hundreds of attacks, literally hundreds of attacks per week from the Gamaredon group. And very often what happens is Gamaredon hands off their most lucrative or their most interesting targets to other groups, such as Invisimol, which is a different agency, but they have a different remit clearly, and they're trying to work on compromising other things. And we've just seen, for the first time, Gamaridan working with Turla. Turla is a very low volume threat actor. They go after really very specific targets. They're almost always trying to compromise government networks, and they're almost always very stealthy in what they're actually trying to achieve. So Gamaridan, very high volume, very noisy. Turla, very quiet and very specific. And we've just seen evidence that we're actually, those targeted machines that Gamaridan sees is then handed over in very specific cases containing very highly sensitive information to the Turla group. But of course, while Ukraine has been the primary focus over the last few years of Russian APT attacks, we also see them targeting Ukraine's allies. We've seen very well-directed phishing attacks to try to compromise ministries of foreign affairs and things that I've said. But also there have been kind of collateral damage. In the very early days, the first days of the invasion, a group called Acid Rain took down not only infrastructure in Ukraine just before the full-scale kinetic invasion, but it knocked out thousands of Enercon's wind turbines across Germany. There was also the attack called Prestige against Polish supporters of Ukraine's institutions in Poland. This was an intentional attack against Poland. So I think we have to agree with Eliza Manningham-Buller, who recently said Britain may already be at war with Russia. I believe we have been at war with Russia since the early part of this century. But we're also seeing a lot of attacks from China, as I've said. And China, I think in the next couple of years, is destined to be the biggest part of our defenses and our work to actually defend the infrastructure that we have and our nations and our democracy. There's a lot of similar targets: government, transportation, engineering, manufacturing, and education. The Chinese are obviously very interested in exfiltrating intellectual property, particularly high-tech sector, but they also want to know what governments are doing. We've seen them active in Ukraine. It's probably very useful for them to know what has been targeted, what has been destroyed, so perhaps in future, they can offer to rebuild something for a price, of course. But they're also targeting the transportation sector. They want to know about logistics. They want to understand how perhaps how the militaries work, how our defense systems work, and several other sectors. So the victimology of this is really directed typically at several countries. There are many threat actors who are focused on the West, but also Asia, Africa, Middle East, and overlaps with several groups. One of the more recent ones that we've seen operating out of China is this unsolicited booker. But there's also Mirrorface, which has been very active in attacking Japan. Japan, obviously, being a sort of a major, let's say, flashpoint for China, but also Japan being a very strong ally of the democratic world. We've also seen many attacks that are focused on Europe, but also in East Asia, where there are various geopolitical factors in there. And I couldn't leave DPRK out of the picture. The main motivation for the North Korean regime is, of course, financial. They need to get money, and so there have been a lot of scams, a lot of ransomware attacks, a lot of financial crimes, again, targeting many of the same sectors. But there have also been infiltrations where the high-tech companies in particular that have been fooled into hiring North Korean agents or hiring North Korean workers to work within their company, who then are able to exfiltrate data. And we've also seen, particularly in the defense and aerospace sector, we've seen a a lot of these very targeted fake job advertisements that try to attract top talent to work for specific agencies or work for specific companies, and those companies are shadow companies of North Korean aligned actors. So just a quick look. The Deceptive Development Group is very active. Its operators are really targeting software developers and aiming not only to steal cryptocurrency with a possible a sort of financial motive, and you can see the type of attacks that have been, the type of companies that have been attacked, and in many cases, again, with false job listings to work at these companies, where they've then fooled the developers, and very often they also steal their cryptocurrency. So they impersonate many companies, particularly in the crypto sector and in the finance sector. Of course, the DPRK has also become involved in the Russian aggression against Ukraine. And this has also started to shift towards working to do espionage, working to attack and target Ukraine from North Korea as well. And just as a final note, as this whole conference is about AI, we very recently, in the last weeks, observed the first known AI-powered ransomware. It actually uses a local LLM on the machine to actually vary its code, vary the way that it works, vary the target on the system, so that, of course, that tries to make it much harder to detect. This was called prompt lock, by the way, so if you want to have a look at that. We've also done a lot of work on disrupting and trying to take down some of these networks of actors, and we've worked with multiple companies, we've worked with multiple law enforcement, and the industry as a whole has been very focused on trying to disrupt these, particularly the ransomware and info stealer groups. So I will leave you with this message in my last 49 seconds, that public and private partnerships are essential. The domain of intelligence, which used to sit with the military, with the government, with defense agencies, is now shared with the private sector. The private sector holds a lot of the intelligence and the data about malicious cyber threat actors. And it's essential also that we generate the political will to be able to have an answer to these threats. Very often, this cyber aggression has not risen to the level of any kind of response or any outward activity that would really discourage some of this, particularly at the nation-state level. As we've seen, cyber warfare is an adjunct to kinetic warfare, and as we move into these very uncertain times, as we see the rise of more use of AI, much more careful targeting, specific targeting, we really need a unified approach to counter the current cyber aggression. Thank you very much.